Hi, Reinhard.
Hey, you good?
Can you hear me?
I
I
read
can
your
hear you.
messenger, George.
Great. Thank you. Andy, appreciate it.
All the time, brother.
Good evening, good afternoon, good morning,
Hello,
everybody.
everyone.
Wherever you're joining us from, welcome back. Welcome to the Light 'em Up Lounge. Welcome to another industry expert panel. I very much look forward to an enlightening and inspiring conversation with a group of legends yet again joining us for today's session. We're getting close. The holiday around the corner. It's getting freezing cold outside, at least in our neck of the woods, and it's about time to take a look at the cigar year 2024 thus far. Um, there's this old quote, may you live in interesting and exciting times. And in fact, we are. There's a lot going on in the world, whether it's politically, economically, all of which, in one way or another, factors into the premium cigar industry and community as well. We want to talk a little bit about that. There's exciting news to share. We want to take a bit of an international perspective, as well as looking at my most recent US trip, where George and I, we had the privilege of touring extensively together. So plenty to talk about. And I'm very happy and honored to welcome such an esteemed group of gentlemen today. We don't have a lady on the panel, unfortunately, but allow me to introduce our panel for tonight. Not sitting next to me anymore, unfortunately, but across the pond. George, it's good to see you, and I miss doing these shows together with you. You know, it's a very different kettle of fish when we're sitting next to each other hosting, but this is sort of the second best option, so I'll take that.
I agree. It's good energy when we're side by side. But I love being able to join such a great group. So happy to be here and honored to be included.
Thanks. Thank you so much for being here with us. Absolute privilege. We do have the one and only Philip Wynn joining us today. Philip, I don't know where exactly you are. I would imagine it's Miami today, but I look forward to hearing from your trips down to the Dominican, Ecuador, and to hear what's going on in the tobacco fields at the factory, and give us a little bit of a behind the scenes perspective on what's happening in the industry. Welcome, Philip.
Greetings to all of you. It's a pleasure and honor to be with you all.
Thank you so much for joining us. Really delighted to have you. There's exciting news from the Premium Cigar Association side. In fact, the PCA just launched a press release about an hour ago about a very interesting partnership and an international format coming to the premium cigar industry with the World Cigar Show in Dubai in 2025. And nobody better to talk to us about that than only the man, the myth, the legend. Joshua, many thanks for joining us and being here with us today. Much appreciated, and thanks for taking the time.
Thanks, Reinhardt. Very excited about the news, obviously, and we got a lot ahead of us in the new year. This has been an exciting year in the U.S., and we've been talking about emerging markets and courts. They have experience doing 18 different shows. They've done things in the Middle East, in Dubai in particular. I think there's one show going on right now as we speak, or just wrapped up. We're excited to work with them. We're a partner of theirs to help facilitate and get manufacturers to participate. Certainly the Middle East and Asia are emerging markets for New World cigars. And as the Premium Cigar Association, we want to be a catalyst for that. Things are on the PCA side. We hired an additional events person with Shannon a couple months ago. So we have everything locked down with our trade show in New Orleans. We're excited for that. But we're also, helping facilitate, use the logistics, the marketing capabilities of the association. And this was a win-win partnership for us. and I want to say firmly, for especially with this audience and the Light 'em Up Lounge, if you are outside of the United States, the PCA is also a home for you with membership. We are welcoming the international community. We hope people will come to the Super Bowl in New Orleans for our trade show. And if you're in Asia and the Middle East and elsewhere, you'll come to the World Cigar in November 11th and 12th of 2025.
Beautiful stuff. To round off the international perspective, we have another guest joining us today, Jem Ayrton, who's with us live from London. And he certainly has a wonderful perspective on the Eastern Hemisphere as well, with his esteemed blog, El Lector blog, which I believe is primarily in Turkish language, but there's also some, of course, international articles and a lot of interesting stuff on there. Jem, it's wonderful to have you, one of our treasured Light 'em Up family members, and currently in London. So I very much look forward to hearing your thoughts as well. And thanks for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me, Reinhard. It's an honor to be on the panel.
Joshua, let me start off with you, since we have you on, and since the news just broke an hour ago. Tell us a little about the World Cigar Show in Dubai, how that whole thing came together, and you briefly mentioned it in your opening statement. The PCA was very adamant about the fact that the international markets are an important part of the equation, and that it's all about sharing resources, sharing our energies and our networks in order to bring the global cigar family closer together and truly expand the reach of the PCA as an organization, to also extend the hand to the international markets. And some of these very dynamic and very, very interesting international markets like the Middle East, like Southeast Asia, and of course, Africa as well.
Yeah, we've been working for the past several years through, small baby steps, so to speak, of, attending the in-country festivals, Pro Cigar, or, a group of us are going to Pro Saborg this January, supporting those events, hosting the International Policy Summit, which we have coming up December 11th, which Reinhard, you will be a part of, moderating one of those sessions on emerging markets. So very, very timely. We've been sharing information, we've been sharing studies, data, best practices on the advocacy front globally. And I think that this is, the first major step the PCA is taking to, cultivate. Ultimately, our hope is to have more international participation in our trade show in New Orleans. We were present at Intertabac, first time we had a booth at Intertabac, engaging with the European market. We think that that's a phenomenal show. Quartz had approached our team. We were talking about, where are the trends heading with New World cigars, and Middle East was always top of mind, also Asia. And, obviously we have kind of North America with our trade show, Intertabac in Europe. And I think the natural void in the industry was having something in the Middle East that could be large scale. I know Rayad on here, who serves on some of our committees, talked with him, kind of put the pieces together. This was something that was negotiated, I think, for about 9 months. We finalized it a couple of weeks ago when I was actually at Intertabac with Quartz, and, got the pieces together, and we're rolling. I think December 10th in Miami, we're going to be hosting a listening session presentation for potential exhibitors. There'll be a virtual component for that as well, trying to get as much participation. And, Quartz has the World Tobacco Show that, just happened in Dubai. Some of the exhibitors there, whether it be accessories or raw premium tobacco sellers, they are already participating. There's already some suppliers, so it's not reinventing the wheel completely, But for us to be involved as a marketing partner, we said it has to be exclusive to cigars. And so, we'll be in a separate area in the Festival City Arena where you can smoke cigars. And, we will be away from all of the other products that are in the tobacco space.
Now, in the press release, you also mentioned that there's supposed to be an educational component with seminars hosted by industry experts joining and presenting whatever type of format they want to present to the audience. How much do you think that the World Cigar Show in Dubai will also reflect on what's happening at the PCA trade show in New Orleans? Because you certainly have a lot of perspectives and experience to share with them to help them get off the ground and hit the ground running when it comes to the premium cigar side. But at the same time, then I guess there's certainly takeaways and learnings to be had from their experience and their formats, which could be re-engineered into the PCA trade show.
Yeah, I mean, it's a win-win for both organizations where this collaboration, we're, supporting each other's strengths and, kind of, filling in the gaps where there's some weaknesses or things that aren't our specialty. I think in New Orleans, you'll see a jam-packed schedule. Where I know that Jeff is on here. I think yesterday in one of our committee meetings, we were talking about how it might be too jam-packed, which is always a good problem to have for the PCA show. But we'll have the U.S. focus at the show. We're trying to create new verticals like this to really focus on the international side. I do see, we've had for the past few years, the International Policy Summit as being virtual. I could see this as being at the World Cigar Show, that educational component would take place of our International Policy Summit. But the thing there is like Quartz, this is their event. We are a supporter of it. We're assisting as you kind of hinted from an advisory capacity, from an experience capacity with our trade show. And then also assisting because we have the relationships with the cigar community. But we hope it's one of those that, if you are a manufacturer, you start the year with the PCA, and some of the other shows that are out there for the other companies, but a staple PCA, Intertobac, World Cigar Show, Dubai. If you have time, obviously the festivals are incredible in country, and I love those, and we're going to be supporting those as a marketing partner as well. So. Again, we don't want to cannibalize or compete anything. It's to really fill a void and make sure that this is top of mind for the cigar industry in the Middle East and Asia.
Beautiful. You just mentioned Jeff, and I wanted to introduce Jeff separately because, of course, such a panel wouldn't be complete without the retailer's perspective, and in fact, the perfect segue to introduce Jeff Grainer here with us from Classic Cigars in Tulsa. Jeff, it's a privilege to have you as well, and I look forward to your thoughts, not only because you're so close to the PCA as well, and you've always been an avid supporter of the organization, thinking about the industry on a much larger level, but also, of course, because of your unique perspective with boots on the ground on the retail side of things. So, Jeff, welcome to you as well, and thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you for the invite. It's great to see everyone on the panel and see you, Reinhard. So looking forward to the show. It'll be fun.
And there's another gentleman who, of course, I have to introduce, and he just sneakily got in through the back door perfectly in time. Mike Kopperman from Cigars of America is here as well. And we also have Harrison in the house, who is an avid supporter and a dear fellow here at the show. So I look forward to having Michael and Harrison chime in whenever they want and can to share some of their thoughts and updates on the regulatory front and share some updates from the cigar rights side, particularly in light of the recent elections and what's in store for the cigar industry over the next couple of years. So welcome to Harrison and Michael from Cigar Rights of America as well.
Thank you. It's a pleasure, Reinhard. Nice to be here.
Many thanks, Michael. Well, first of all, after the brief update from Joshua, I would like to hand the microphone to Philip Wynn, and let's start with our hands in the soil. Let's talk a little bit about the most recent events in the manufacturing countries, in the tobacco growing countries. And Philip, maybe you can share a bit of your experience and expertise of what's happening in the Dominican, in Ecuador? How's the crop looking? What are your thoughts as to the raw material side and the manufacturing side here towards the end of 2024?
Well, thank you. Right now, we're at the end of our growing cycle in Ecuador. So the tobacco is all coming out from the various tobacco barns. They're going to muling, and people, all the producers are getting are if they haven't shipped right now, they're starting to get ready to ship from now probably to the early part of February. Unfortunately, the situation in Ecuador is disastrous. And this is going to affect the cigar world in one way or the other. Disastrous in the sense that the crop is very good, but it's a lawless state. Yesterday, 3 containers of tobacco were hijacked from 3 suppliers, and their contents were stolen. So now a lot of the growers are very nervous. New security measures have to be taken in place. The containers would have to be escorted. Either we have to put GPS tracking in them, and all of this is done by local gangs that have inside information from the various growers that a container is leaving, and then they just lay in wait a few kilometers down the road, take the container, open it up, steal the cartons, and get away with usually a container holds about 20 to 25,000 pounds of wrapper. So that is going to affect the market downline because, one, there's going to be a lot less people investing in tobacco in Ecuador until the situation is normalized. 2, we're going to have 2 scenarios of tobacco. The tobacco that's being stolen only can get sold, obviously, to cigar-producing countries, Nicaragua, Honduras, or the Dominican Republic, or maybe even make their way to other countries, such as China. And those are going to probably be at a lower price because obviously there's no expense on their end. And on the other hand, the people that are producing tobacco are going to have to raise their prices because now they're having these other issues to deal with. So ultimately, it's going to be a very complicated road for growers in Ecuador in particular. And when I'm talking Ecuador, I'm talking primarily wrapper because that's what's coming out of there. So we will see what will happen. But in terms of crop, the crop this year, as opposed to last year, which we were affected by the Niño syndrome, is very good. The tobacco is amazing. The yield is great. Everything is good. But again, now we're faced with this new layer in this tobacco distribution cycle. Let's say to see it. As for manufacturing, everyone's waiting now for tobacco for leaf so that they can start their 2025 productions.
Philip,
So
I have
just
a
to put a little
question,
bit
if
of
I may. Sorry to interrupt you, Reinhard. A quick question from my side. Do you have a percentage of this, or what's the percentage of stolen versus entire production in terms of leaves? Do you have that kind of
No, because
number?
this has just happened. This is the first time it's happened in all the years that I've worked. So, but to give you an idea, right now probably close to 60 to 75,000 pounds were stolen. So Ecuador probably produces maybe 15 times that amount. So we're already probably close to 5% has been stolen. So I don't know if is phenomenal will stop because we kind of know who is behind it, and the people behind it aren't very intelligent, because in order to export tobacco, you need to go through a tobacco exporter and produce a license, and it has to go via the shipping companies. So we kind of know who's doing it, because we're seeing who is producing unmarked cartons and where those cartons are going to, because obviously they have to take away the tobacco from the existing shipping cartons and place them in new ones, and then use the facility of some tobacco exporter. So we're going to get on top of it, but I'm just saying it's creating a bit of chaos right now in the industry.
Yeah, wish you the best.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Philip, I just wanted to put a little bit of perspective to this, and maybe you can elaborate for our viewers as to the importance of Ecuador when it comes to particularly wrapper tobacco supply for the industry.
Well, Ecuador is the prime producer of premium wrapper in the industry, both in the Havana variety and the Sumatra. Havana varieties that are be growing there is Havana 2000, is the Vuelta Abajo tobacco, which is called HVA, which is Havana Vuelta Abajo, and some Criollo. And then Sumatra, we have two strains, one which we call Cameroon, which is a hybrid, and the other one is the original Sumatra. This tobacco, which is, as I repeat, only wrapper, goes mainly to the cigar producing countries, which are Nicaragua and Dominican, which are producing the majority of cigars at the moment. And most of the manufacturers use at least part of their supply with Ecuadorian tobacco. Some also use sun-grown Havana from Central America. Some use Cameroon from Africa. Some use Sumatra from Indonesia, another variety. So very few use Aripiraca from Brazil. But so the bulk of, let's say, the bulk of the industry, I would say, and maybe George can chime in, but I would think 70%, 65 to 70% of wrapper tobacco comes from Ecuador.
So it's a massive amount of tobacco and a significant impact for the industry at large that we're talking about here. The political issues aside, what are we looking at in terms of environmental evolutions? What is it that we're looking at in terms of agricultural challenges ahead? Obviously, climate change being an issue all over the place, and it'll make for a drastically different growing environment for many different industries and pretty much all across the world. But how much of that do you currently see already affecting Ecuador and even the other growing or manufacturing countries?
The main area that we're seeing it is that the time that we're used to growing is now kind of diminished, because in Ecuador in particular, and in some parts of Central America, the rainy season is coming upon us early, and the drought season, which is at the beginning, is extended. So we're seeing that we're getting a narrower window to grow tobacco in. But with this climate change evolution, and it won't affect us now, I imagine that in the future there are going to be countries that have never produced tobacco that are going to be able to produce tobacco if this trend in the world, global warming, continues. So it could have its good point and its bad point. But in terms of what's going on the ground there, a lot of people are experimenting with different seed varieties, trying new nuances in the type of hybrid solutions that they're looking for. We're always we always have a struggle with various parasites, such as blue mold and different parasites that face that. So we're looking for tobacco that's resistant. And also the trends of the cigar market basically originate from the growing cycle. So if there's a lot of light wrapper tobacco coming out, just to make it very elementary, a lot of cigars that will be hitting the market will have a lighter shade wrapper. And if it's the averse, then you're going to see there'll be a lot of darker tones. So ultimately, the cigar makers you know, are what's the best expression looking are captive to what the tobacco producers can make.
I think that's such an interesting point because most of the times we're made to believe it's the other way around, that the manufacturers set certain trends or they react to certain demands on the consumer level, where, you know, obviously Mexican San Andres is the talk of town, or one of the most popular wrapper tobaccos, and everybody seems to be coming out with a new limited edition or regular production cigar using that type of tobacco. There was a certain period in time where Connecticut broadleaf was, the biggest hype and trend. But what you're saying is that it's sort of the opposite effect. Depending on the supply of the tobacco, is where we'll probably see trends shifting towards.
Yes, that's what I believe entirely. And when talking about Santo Andres is very interesting. Santo Andres was originally a pelo de oro plant that was transplanted into Mexico, and through the years has evolved into the Santo Andres tobacco that one sees. But it's originally a Cuban seed. So again, it's the adaptation of different seeds and varieties of seeds to the microclimates that they're grown in, and the experience and the way that the tobacco culture is in that country that produces the wrapper that you're now seeing on your cigars. So this is constantly evolving, and it's great. It's, don't get me wrong, because it's innovative. Because now people are coming in and seeing, maybe we can try this, maybe we can try that. But again, we are only tools that 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 work thanks to nature. So we are limited to what we can make due to the climatic conditions of the world, due to the workforces that we have, the labor forces, due to irrigation, due to pesticides, due to non-pesticides if we want to go that route. So it's a very finite market. So all of that is interesting in the sense that we are creating a product that is a luxury product, but again, we have no real say in the matter. We can use our knowledge, but in the end, if the volcanoes erupt in Ecuador and the fields are covered with ash, there goes the crop. And so it's little things like that that can change the world demand in a second.
Reinhard, if I may.
Please, of course, George.
So Philip, great as always. I think the word you were looking for before was beholden. Cigar makers are beholden to what Mother Nature grants them. And the beauty of the dance is that different cigar makers in different countries are going to have very different approaches to what the material will allow them to create, and they'll all have their own particular spin. And one other thing to be aware of is you're talking about the idea that as the climates change as a result of warming, and you see the possibility that countries could come online with a significant tobacco crop that could become a tool that makers can use. The thing to remember is that it takes a long time to develop the workforce to actually harvest that product in a sympathetic manner. In other words, to make it useful. Think about the changes that happened 20 plus years ago in Brazil to completely alter what was happening to that crop and how usable it would be to premium cigar makers in other markets besides the big domestic market for Brazilian tobacco.
Yeah, you're totally spot on. And when I said that, I didn't really put a window of the immediate, but I'm saying that these are things that I can see that are happening in the future. And
Absolutely.
but you gave me the right word. We are beholden to it, and we are beholden to the innovative side. Remember, we as I kind of wear two hats because I grow and I make cigars, so I know both sides of the equation. But remember that the cigar growers have a skill, a set of skills, but then the cigar makers add that. So we make the paint, but they provide the brush strokes. on that canvas.
That's why I said it's a creative dance. It's beautiful.
So so might take a tobacco that I will this year's crop, let's say, is lighter in tones. They can take that, they can ferment it, they can give it more fermentation and make it darker. So they get to play with that source. But again, if all of a sudden I have very our color tones are very dark for some reason or the other, it's very hard to do the opposite. You can't
Yeah.
light, you know, and then we're old enough to know Candela wrappers, and the struggles that people that went through with the Candela wrappers. That was the most popular cigar in the 1960s in the United States. But nowadays it's impossible to do because the workforce is not trained for that. You have to shock the tobacco in the barn with heat, and then eventually make a cigar that gets to the marketplace and smoked rather quickly. Otherwise, the green becomes yellow. So there's a lot of things in there.
And if you don't have that technique, you don't teach it, because the people that try and do that just one cycle, one time to produce a limited amount of tobacco for use in cigars that they're going to sell at St. Patrick's are only going to have a limited degree of success with it. They don't understand the process.
Yeah, and talking with you now, I've just thought of something. This is it's a sad moment because a lot of this is going to be forgotten, because a lot of the
Exactly.
older people in this business are not the new ones aren't interested. They're not passing on this information, so there is no volumes, there's no manuals, and that knowledge will disappear, and
Yeah.
to the great detriment of all of us. So
Yes.
Philip, do you think that part of the reason we've seen so many limited edition releases over the last couple of years is a consequence of stronger fluctuations in terms of the raw material supply, all these challenges that you were describing on an agricultural and environmental level? Do you think that factors into how the market is coming out with new releases, smaller, shorter runs of cigars where you only make 20,000, 50,000? Or would you say that's more a consequence of consumer behavior, the retail side of things, and how manufacturers are trying to, get away with doing these short runs here and there rather than actually working on developing that strong core portfolio?
Well, I think mainly it's marketing in the sense that the manufacturers, let's step back. All the serious manufacturers have contracts out with growers, so they are taking the bulk of the tobacco that they need because they have so many cigars that they need to make. Now, there's a lot of smaller manufacturers that are in the middle. What do they do? Do they have the financial wherewithal to buy and stock tobacco for 3 years or 4 years, or to buy a large quantities of tobacco so that they have the same amount of color hues and the same amount of tobacco that
Consistency.
or they can get their hands on 3 or 4 bales, and now that's what they can afford and that's what they can do. Not saying that those 3 and 4 bales aren't good; they're probably great tobacco, but then they have to come out with that limited edition because after that they don't have that tobacco anymore. So that's where I think it's more of a marketing standpoint, personally.
Good point. George, you mentioned something, and about a week ago, you said on a very interesting panel with Pierre Duplessis for his 7th anniversary for the Alosa Fumo takes. And I know the question came up as to whether we could see a shift towards other manufacturing countries, and whether there could be an opportunity for untapped territories to try and eat away a little bit or add to the overall pie, and challenge the bigger ones like Nicaragua, Honduras, the Dominican Republic as new kids on the block, offering great quality cigars with the consistency and great smoking experience. And we touched on this briefly with the tobacco and the raw material side as well, but maybe that's something that both you and Philip could elaborate on. Besides the environmental agricultural challenges, we see all sorts of issues on the labor force and with brain drains in pretty much all of the large manufacturing countries. So taking all of this into consideration, what's both your perspective, Philip and George, in regards to the working forces in the current major manufacturing countries, and whether there could be opportunity for new upcoming manufacturing origins and countries?
Well, let's take an example for China. China now is buying tobacco, massive tobacco buying. They're buying tobacco from everywhere because they have a massive industry and they have a massive market. But they don't have they don't have the know-how. And I don't see that know-how coming soon. That know-how is in the hands of very few people. And those people are mainly Cubans or of Cuban origin, of people of Central America or Dominican Republic, and they have a tie to their land and to their home. And a lot of them won't. Some will be attracted by financial rewards to go overseas and try to instill their knowledge. But then the workforce, you have a language problem. How does a Spanish speaking gentleman that probably knows only Spanish, has lived all his life working in the fields, communicate his skill to Chinese workers? And the Chinese business technique is probably a more rushed process because they want to get product out to the market sooner based on their experience of world business compared to the more laid back approach of letting time, cure the tobacco that other countries have taken. That's my opinion. So I think that for other countries to become serious cigar producers, I don't see that happening. At least the quality stuff. You're telling me to talk about machine-made products, but I don't see it.
Philip, I think we lost your audio for a bit, or your sound was a bit muffled, so I didn't hear
Yeah.
the last few words.
I was wondering if George concurs with that with me as well. That was my last question.
Well, I think I agree wholeheartedly with the observations that you make about difficulty in transitioning the culture. The Chinese have been after this knowledge for a long time, and they've had some limited success with getting people to go. But I don't believe there's. I think the approach to cigar making, to how tobacco is matured and how cigars are made, is anathema to the modern Chinese structure. So people might be able to communicate by virtue of AI and some other tools that are there. But I don't believe that necessarily means that the host country embraces it, right? In other words, we don't have any idea whether they're going to respond to the idea of, understanding tobacco and not just cultivation, but how you manipulate it, how you age it, how you then transition into manufacturing facilities. I think it's a huge challenge, and they're a long, long way away from becoming a force that any of us really have to consider in terms of manufacturing. I do think that there's a possibility that we see more, some growth of manufacturing in the United States as prices for cigars, and particularly, the kind of premium cigars that places like Titan de Bronze and some of the things that are being developed in Tampa now, again, a return to old standards. That's a possibility. And I do, as I was saying in that Bear podcast, I think Honduras is poised to make a comeback in terms of its importance to its recognition amongst American consumers, so that it muscles back onto the stage and maybe takes some ground away from Nicaragua. But
I agree with you. Remember,
but I don't see. Sorry, I would just Philip really quickly before, and I'll bounce back to you because obviously you're much closer. I would like to see Costa Rica mature some and see more. And I know you have particular insights about that. I think we've seen great results, but the cost of producing there has kept it down in terms of U.S. market acceptance, right? In other words, the pricing of the product that results because of the state of their economy is not conducive to nosing your way into a market first by underpricing. But I don't see Jamaica coming back into the picture anytime soon. So I think for our purposes, the question is going to be whether Mexico can rise a little bit, whether Honduras snatches back some market share, and if Costa Rica can inch up a little bit. And like I said, I'm particularly interested in your take on Costa Rica because I know you have so much direct experience there.
Yeah, well, George, going back to the 1990s when I started making cigars and you were on the other end in the retailer, what was the two most sold cigars? It was Honduran and Jamaica, right?
Yes,
Jamaica.
absolutely,
They were
absolutely.
the most cigars sold in the country. And I agree with you. Honduras is poised for that because Honduras has a tobacco culture,
Yes,
and it can get there. Going back to Costa Rica, unfortunately, the government is anti-smoking, anti-tobacco. So the government doesn't allow, they don't encourage it. They don't have the workforce. The workforce that is most of the rollers in Costa Rica are Nicaraguans. 90% of them are Nicaraguans. So they have to come over. Most of them are illegal. They don't have their visas. And obviously now the cost to produce a cigar there is getting higher and higher.
much
And
higher, much higher.
and the local Costa Ricans aren't interested in learning that trade in so much, So they're since their economy is healthier than Nicaragua, they can make more money. I mean, individuals can make more money by doing other jobs than by rolling cigars. So I think I think Costa Rica, even though it can produce some good cigars, you won't grow that market very much. I don't think that market will grow. Panama might be. Panama if they start importing, but again, it's the lack of the workforce. The workforce in Central America is Honduras and Nicaragua, without a doubt. And Honduras is the one that probably could take back a lot of the market from Nicaragua.
Do you see Colombia being a factor? Andy asked that, and it's an interesting thought.
Colombia produces they produce the Cubita variety, which some people like, some people don't like, but they do produce tobacco. I think that I don't know. Again, you're going to have to train a workforce, and is that workforce too sophisticated to want to make cigars? Because, as you know, George, if you want to start making cigars and you start, it's going to take you 3 years before you have rollers.
Before you've trained anybody up to export from.
Right. So that's a large.
It's a long-term investment.
It's a long-term.
Just last week, Michael Koppelman and I we sat together at Capital Cigar in Bethesda, where George is currently at, and Michael and I we had a very interesting conversation. Part of which was also what's currently happening in Nicaragua. And Michael, you shared some concern about the political landscape there, what could eventually happen to the labor there, and how that could affect the industry on a larger level. Could you elaborate on that a little bit, please?
Reinhardt, forgive me if you're talking to me. You broke up. Would you mind repeating that?
Michael, I was just referring back to the conversation you and I had last week at Capitol. And I remember fondly you also brought Nicaragua into the conversation, and that you're concerned about how the current political environment and everything that's happening in the country could pose challenges for the industry moving forward and the manufacturing aspect.
Yeah, so I don't have much I can say other than we're constantly monitoring what happens in Central America. I'm sure it's no news to people that watch the politics that they're often on shifting sands. and the Dominican Republic remains a very close ally of the United States, and some of the other regions have at times been flirting closer with some of the more socialist models. So that's something that I think has been of concern to members of Congress, and it's just something we continue to monitor.
Reinhard, I can tell you from my personal experience, I was
Philip, sorry, we can't hear you.
Can you hear
Audio's
me
bad
now?
again.
Yeah, that's better.
Okay. I said on my personal experience, I was one of the first people to invest into Nicaragua when the first Sandinista regime left and Violeta Chamorro came in. And then when Ortega won again, I publicly left Nicaragua because I didn't believe in the policies of that. And I was the only one to do so. But that's me personally. But I do believe that you have come up, and Michael has a very good point, especially with the election of our current president, our new president, that there might be some political winds
Flowback.
that fallback that maybe will hurt the exports of Nicaragua in terms of tariffs and things of that nature. That I don't know, but again, it's interesting. But on the other hand, one looks at Cuba, and Cuba has managed to be the premier cigar maker and has managed to survive all political situation. So maybe Nicaragua might have a fallback towards the United States, but I think probably globally it will manage to sell cigars, personally.
Yeah, that's well
Michael,
stated.
could you
The
probably...
tariff, please.
No, please go ahead. I wanted to just ask you a follow-up question anyways, but please take the mic and great to hear some more of your thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, firstly, I concur with Philip. I always love to take an opportunity, by the way, just to say 30 years ago, Philip, the blend that you did with the Don Melo Centenario, I still think is one of the greatest blends ever done. And I often with George have bemoaned the loss of that farm of Don Jorge Bueso's son in Copan that no longer is growing those beautiful tobaccos you so brilliantly blended. But again, just hats off. It is one of the greatest blends I've ever had in my life. Amazing.
Michael, thanks. And thank you, Michael. But that again, that was going back to our earlier discussion. That's the act of God. That's nature. Hurricane mix,
Yeah.
the topsoil, and it's finished. So if that happens,
Oh.
it happens in Nicaragua, can happen anytime. There it goes.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my God, was it good? But in terms of tariffs, in terms of trade, these are going to be really dynamic issues, not just for the growing regions, but globally. I think I share Josh's cautious optimism that we're going into a very exciting time. Prior to the election, we had a historic arbitrary and capricious ruling in 23, and then of course the vacator in 22, the vacator last year. And now while we're under appeal, we're going into the next administration, not just having been vacated, but we also have one of the best conditions for a post Loper Bright and corner post environment where the Chevron deference had been rolled back. So 40 years of a rulemaking standard is now gone, and it's going to be such a sea change in three branches of government. Having a conservative administration to set the precedents for how Congress and the courts and the agency deals in this new environment probably is the optimal condition we could have hoped for. So we are really looking forward to working as we have with legislators on both sides of the aisle. And it could also be that in times past where we were very successful by separating all of the distinctions with a premium hand-rolled cigar, and we maintain that the META definition is the best protective element, we think there's a lot of opportunities to build bridges with our brothers and sisters in other parts of the industry because we have far more arrows in the quiver now. And we think there'll be a lot of really good opportunities to collaborate and to work together. But again, cautiously optimistic, I think best encapsulates how we're looking at this.
I would agree with everything that Mike said on that, and specifically on the tariff front. I think it's important to note that it's not just the cigars themselves, but the accessory market and humidors. I think that that's going to be even more challenging to navigate in terms of tariffs. I mean, you have a lot of cutters, lighters, humidors that are produced in China, which seems to be the focal point of the tariffs discussion. So, that's kind of where we're trying to figure out as new personnel are announced. They'll obviously wait for confirmation, and that will be a process. We're monitoring that. With Senator Rubio potentially being the Secretary of State. That's someone that uniquely understands the premium cigar sector, representing Florida. Both Mike and CRA, and as well as myself and PCA, have been in that office multiple times in his Senate capacity. So we'll have some relationships that run deep over a number of years, and it's tricky. I think that I would agree with Mike's summation of cautiously optimistic. That's how we are approaching the next few years. And we already, for the PCA trade show in New Orleans, have a dozen members of Congress that are interested in attending, and that cuts across both parties. I think it's important. We were participatory in the campaign cycle, supported pro-cigar candidates on both sides of the aisle. And I think that everybody recognizes on this call, the associations are able to, play chess or play cards, whatever the analogy may be, with whatever you're dealt with.
We need to be recruiting the Taiwanese manufacturers now. That's got to be a new.
Michael, Joshua, question.
Go ahead. I was just kidding, but wait, we need a Taiwanese manufacturers. We need a Taiwanese manufacturers neighborhood in the PCA, right? So support your local Taiwanese humidor maker.
Michael, Joshua, with the new government just slowly taking shape, and the appeal pending, of course, how much a proactive approach can the CRA and PCA take, especially during that transition period, to set the industry up for continued success for the next couple of months and years to follow? Are there any proactive steps that you're currently thinking about or investigating that could
Your
be
internet
taken
is breaking you up.
Reinhard, you're breaking up again.
Yeah, it's bouncing.
Yeah, I'll just sort my Wi-Fi here, but just to repeat my question, I was curious about how proactive the organizations could be in taking action now whilst the new government is taking shape.
Josh. Josh, go ahead. I'll be happy to go next.
Yeah, I would just say, a lot of the newly elected members of Congress are in for orientation this week. Our, schedule of events and direct one-on-one meetings begin very swiftly. I'm sure, our partner organizations are doing the very similar, looking at who's the newly elected members of Congress. And, we get in there and do 100+ meetings of the 101, correcting the record, making sure that, people don't perceive premium cigars to just be a big cigarette, which, sometimes can be a prevailing fallacy. So, making sure that they're educated on the basics about the industry, about the cigar culture, the retail community in the United States, that's top of mind for us. So, we will have a very aggressive schedule for January, February, and March on our government affairs side, as well as here. And I think Mike knows this better than anybody, the history and the decades of work that his team and that he's been involved with. We've compiled a lot of that information. We coordinate with both organizations, and we try and put that information to see where the legislative regulatory side has gone. And I think that's why we say it's cautiously optimistic. 4 years ago, 5 years ago, we were staring behind the barrel of a gun, so to speak. And now we feel a lot better given the vacatur ruling. Now we're not out of the woods completely. We are pending appeal. But there's a lot of facts and communications and research that has come out since then that really fortifies our arguments moving forward.
Yeah, I echo Josh's sentiments, Reinhard. With regards to transition specifically, internally, we're constantly working during administration changes with the lobby shops and law firms that we use to not just see where our grass tops or relationships with incoming administrators or cabinet level or staffers are, but also the law firms and the lobby shops themselves. So we're able to really amplify our reach. So this time in a transition, we're constantly monitoring what the daily picks are, who the likely candidates are to be for those vacancies, and then where our touch points are. So there's a lot of internal just analysis at this stage.
Great points, and thank you both for sharing that. I do apologize for my Wi-Fi being a little spotty. A cigar lounge is a great place to have a cigar. Not always the best to have a Zoom meeting and stable Wi-Fi connection. I hope we got it sorted though. So just give me a shout out and let me know if it gets iffy again. But we should be better now. Let's take a glance at what all of this translate into in terms of market dynamics, the sales environment, the sentiment on the retail level. Because at the end of the day, talking about the raw material growing aspect, the manufacturing side, and the legal framework, all of this somehow translates into market dynamics. We saw that throughout 2024 thus far, import numbers into the US have been very stable and strong, continuing on the not necessarily growth, but at least on a stable trajectory, and looking for continued success in terms of sales and the import numbers into the US. So Jeff and George, also with your perspective, of course, could you elaborate a little bit on what's your feeling for the year 2024 in terms of market dynamics, customer feedback, new customers entering the shops and express interest in premium cigars, and how all of that factors into overall sales?
Sales have definitely been good this year. There's no doubt. A lot of great product coming out. So really, it just comes down to staying on top of the trends and making sure you're stocked. Customer engagement for different avenues, whether it's social media, cigar events, giving them a place to find home is what it boils down to. So it's very important to have those personal relationships with the customer. So I think we'll continue to see strong growth next year. Obviously, the political landscape is a concern, and it's, Jay brought this up in a meeting yesterday about, ordering up on accessories just in case. So I think, going into PC next year, I think being earlier in the year, because I mean, if there is a tariff conversation, maybe the trade show's early enough. I think we're going to see higher accessory sales at the trade show. I know I'll be thinking about it, maybe buying for the entire year and having to maybe cut back a little bit on cigar buying, just so I can get them at the cheaper prices and delay hopefully it doesn't happen, but delay the type of potential effect into that. So, I think the main concern for me, and it has been for several years, just the price increases. There's not much we can do about it, but cigars are getting expensive. I mean, and I think certain brands are offsetting their losses in other areas with marking up certain brands. Maybe their bread and butter brands have the percentage of increases have definitely gone up from some companies compared to some of their other blends. When you see $1 to $1.50 retail increases year after year from certain brands, they're starting to price themselves out of the market. So, but you also see less of the budget cigars coming out. So that concerns me year after year, but so far I haven't seen a whole lot of cutbacks on certain price points. Definitely some of the more expensive limited editions have done a lot better than I anticipated, so that's great. But it'll be curious to see. We've had such high inflation the last couple of years. I just haven't seen a huge effect on our purchase behavior yet. So time will tell on a lot of these things.
Jeff, on that note, ever since we saw that tremendous uptick in terms of sales volumes and excitement about the sales, both in the US and internationally, coming out of that COVID boom, people were trying to make sense of what had happened and where that demand ultimately came from, whether it was your typical average cigar smoker enjoying 4 or 5 cigars a week rather than 1 or 2, or did we really see an influx of new consumers, a younger generation getting into premium cigars? And pair that with the price sensitivity aspect that you just mentioned. So first, my question is twofold. First, do you see these new consumers coming into the game and joining the premium cigar community? And then secondly, where do you think they land in terms of their price sensitivity, given that they probably haven't experienced a time where your average cigar was somewhere between $7 and $9, but now the starting point for them is somewhere between $12 and $15. So are they just accustomed to a higher starting price point? How do you see that in the greater scheme of things?
Yeah, I think you're spot on with the newer cigar smokers don't know what the older price points were. So yeah, 12 to 15 being the new norm. They've accepted it. People, they know the price of everything goes up. So the older generation of cigar smokers will either pay it or they will try to find some cheaper. But I think back to the COVID point, yeah, we definitely, and it was both. It was people were smoking more because they were home. And then we did have a lot of new customers. I think the cigar culture has greatly expanded. And some of that could be due to social media. For us, being a cigar bar in an entertainment district, people walk by, they see our patio busy, and oh, what's that? Let's go check it out. Stores having a good time, fun people. So, it's about the socialization here. So the demographics have definitely changed as far as new cigar smokers. Definitely, I think the fastest growing demographic is women. It's great. So I continue to see that trend for several years. Women-owned cigar brands, we see those popping up more often, being more active on social media. So I see a lot of avenue for growth all around as far as our customer base.
Thank you, Jeff. Much appreciated. And Philip, George, you both have lived through the ups and downs, the booms and busts of the industry over the last couple of decades. Do you think that right now, here at the end of 2024, the foundation, the basis of premium cigar consumers is the biggest we've ever seen in the history of cigars?
Well, certainly in a modern era, the base is broader and deeper than we've had before, and also less identified. So, for instance, the boom of the '90s was the biggest thing to happen to the cigar business since the short-term spike in cigar smoking in this country after the original Surgeon General's report appeared in 1964. And there was a huge spike, which essentially was gone by 1967. That didn't happen with the boom of the '90s and everything that happened since. In other words, we've had more or less manageable growth after having tripled the size of the industry in half a decade, essentially. What I think is demographically what's interesting is that I believe, and especially if you're operating a cigar bar, if you take a look around on a busy night, the age and to some degree the ethnicity of the customer is dramatically different. It is a hugely different audience. It's younger, and by that by virtue of their embrace of social media for informing all aspects of their life, what they're drinking, what they're eating, where they're going, the explosion of cigar media has greatly benefited that audience being more sophisticated than the old time consumers were. So that's been a tremendous boon for everybody and for sustaining. The other thing is that the COVID surge of customers was a mix, I think, to some degree, of some people coming back to cigars as a tool that they already knew, but maybe had sort of drifted away from as far as being an integral part of their personal week of planning of, this is me time and I'm going to enjoy myself in this way. That came back, but it also recruited a big, big new generation of consumers. And I don't think um, I don't think that audience dissipated. In other words, it didn't go away once there was a return to normalcy in terms of what was open and what was not. Instead, they embraced a new social experience that was, it's hard to resist the satisfaction and the joys of finding yourself in a new community where you're sharing this experience with people. And as we have all discussed, whether publicly or privately amongst ourselves, that one of the great attractions of the modern cigar experience is the deeply social aspect, is the part of it that reaches across every boundary that we know and that intrudes on our lives in every other arena of it. But the cigar shop, the cigar bar, the cigar lounge seems to bridge all those gaps. And you have these tremendous um, community, for lack of a better way to describe it, that these people that bond together, and the rewards of that they can't be overstated. And once people embrace that, once they discover that they actually can be a part of it, and the rewards that it gives them, you don't put that down that easy. So I believe that there's growth. I do think that we're probably going to see some pushback about aggressive price increases. In other words, I think there are going to be some manufacturers that realize that they have to tame their year on year planning as it has been, and that there'll be renewed efforts to offer some value propositions to consumers so that they continue to attract some of the younger people who don't have the same discretionary income. And I believe the industry is ready for that. They're ready to be able to take advantage of it.
I hope you're right on that, truly. I kind of wonder if, this coming year, I mean, there's no user fee, so I'm hoping that they'll take that into account and go, instead of doing $1 increase, maybe it's just 25 cents or 50 cents like it was, back 15,
Right.
20
Back in
years
the day.
ago. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
15 cent, 25 cent every year. I Yeah, that would be great. So hopefully the manufacturers are listening.
Well, let's salute some of the manufacturers too, who have
Absolutely.
also made a point of restraining that have done every other year price increases or have aggressively ameliorated their own internal pressures on income and made their price increases more palatable for everybody. In other words, they were very savvy of where they fit in the marketplace structure and said, let me be gentle in this and hope that not only can I not lose anybody, but I can grow some people because we're being less aggressive in this.
Yeah, there was definitely a couple of companies. I mean, you could say Perdomo, my father, that skipped or did very, very small price increases and didn't do a price increase for several years. They just ate it. You know, they
Right.
ate it because
They just
nothing is
yes.
going cheaper. So I think, and one other,
But they deserve loyalty for that. Sorry,
absolutely,
didn't mean to.
absolutely. No, you're absolutely right. You know, and one other thing, you know, that's an interesting, you know, cigar events. You know, everything's about swag, and you know that as well as I do. That swag's not free. We might have gotten it free, but that's figured into the budget of the cigar companies. They're like, we're going to spend whatever $1 million on cases and cutters and lighters. Well, what do you think pays for that? That's cigar price increases. So, you know, I see our online big discounting again. I mean, I see a lot of price increases I think are used to make up for what they're spending in other areas and or constant monthly promotions that we see. I mean, buy so many, get this free. It's like, well, that's not really free at the end of the day. You figure that in a year ago to your price increase, and we're the ones still paying for it, even though on the surface it looks free. So I'd almost like to see less monthly promotions from some companies if that will help keep just the yearly price increase down. No.
And the swag's going to get more expensive anyway because we know where most of it is coming from. So be prepared for the fact that it isn't going to be just cheap goods that are easy to fold into their marketing strategy. But listen, consumers, they're smarter than we give them credit for in a lot of circumstances. In other words, they know, okay, I like having a free hat or this is a nice new lighter or something like that, but they understand where it's coming.
Oh, everyone's got enough swag though. I'd rather just come out with a very good event cigar that's only available at events and skip the lighters and cutters because I know some customers that have more accessories than I do.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. They can start their own store.
Yeah, they have on Facebook Marketplace reselling it.
Jeff, you mentioned one word, and I briefly wanted to pick Michael and Joshua's brain on that, even though it might be a little too early to come to a final conclusion on that yet. But you mentioned the user fees, and I know that's part of the ongoing conversation, and it will be part of the appeal as well. But Michael, Joshua, can you probably just very briefly comment on the user fee aspect and how that could eventually tie in with what Jeff said in regards to the pricing of the cigars?
It was a recent topic of discussion during the appellate review in the circuit court. We too were cautiously optimistic on the outcome. We hope we have at least two of the three judges that are favorable to upholding the decision from the lower court, but there was some questioning, which is in the public record, regarding if, in fact, there would be any claim on past user fees. We, of course, have no standing. Cigar Rights of America, and for that matter, I think Josh would concur, PCA and CAA don't pay legal fee, the user fees. It's the individual manufacturers, as an example, the CRA represents, that individually pay user fees. So we don't know where they will land on that. There has not been any conversations or decisions taken with regards to the past. And there are questions too as to the viability of which court would handle that, right? It could very likely be a court of federal claims if in fact individual manufacturers chose to do that. I think that if you were to ask the amount in the 8 years of regulation, the estimate is $15 to $20 million a year was paid in user fees. And my personal opinion is I believe that there is a valid claim that given that we are now vacated, there never was or retroactively should be a refund, perhaps because it would not have applied. But those decisions are taken by the very manufacturers who have the investment in it. So time will tell. That certainly isn't something that would be decided now. We await the outcome. It could be in 30 days. It could be in 60 to 90 days. We don't know. But we're optimistic that they will take the right decision, that the judge made a vacator ought to be upheld. Josh, did you have any thoughts to add?
No, I'm not going to comment too much on it because it's an active thing in active litigation. So I think, Mike, you gave a pretty good summary of where things stand.
Yeah, yeah. So time will tell. I think our arguments, I will say, moving forward, are better than they've ever been. I was looking back at an economic report that was done in 2017, and there were many compelling reasons then that the economist, Dr. Zorn, had stated that we're in the best interest of FDA to exempt premium cigars. Since that time, we have seen concurrent waves from the path longitudinal studies that make our best arguments for us with regards to low consumption. We have excellent mortality and morbidity and lack of youth usage and initiation compared to other products. Since that time, we've had Reagan-Udall findings. We've had NASEM, which did a comprehensive report on premium cigars. And we maintain, as we have for 17 years, that there isn't a warrant to extend a regulatory framework on a premium. So moving forward, we're confident we can continue to educate on these ideas. And we're at a time now where so many of the tobacco control interests are now touting our line, saying to FDA, you should exempt premium cigars. You should not be regulating them. We exhaust resources of the agency that could be applied to other categories where they do at least have a potential to make a difference at the population level and move that public policy health needle in a positive way. But because we don't have the health concerns and issues, there's nothing to be gained by regulating us. What will happen, though, is it'll take a lot of mom and pop retailers and business owners and manufacturers and wholesalers and just put them out of business. So I think our arguments over time have become even stronger.
Excellent points. Many thanks to both of you. And in the section here at the lounge, Ian made a very valid point of in the UK, a $12 cigar would definitely be something everybody would be looking forward to. Let me say, Ian, I'm so glad that you're here with us and that we can enjoy a cigar together and see you in good shape and good health. So thanks for joining us today, and I hope that everything is good on your end. But we're all here to support you, and I hope that you're on the up and up. But this also gives me an opportunity to ask Cem about his perspective and his international view on these topics, particularly when it comes to the dynamics in the market, consumer behavior, demand, and of course the price point also.
Yeah, thank you very much, Rainer. I guess from consumer point of view, I would say there are a couple of aspects that have an impact directly on the behavior. One is probably what's accessible in the market. A market like UK versus a market like Turkey, for example, is very different in terms of what the consumers can access in terms of cigars. Turkey being far behind than UK or pretty much any country in Europe in terms of import regulations when it comes to tobacco products, in the sense that they are kind of they're kind of held back, and it's been made so difficult to import and not lucrative to import cigars. People basically don't have access to Cubans or even to New World cigars to the extent that Europeans have access to. There's Oliva and Nub coming legally into the country, but pretty much anything else coming in is either fake Cubans or has been smuggled into the country. Whereas in UK, obviously, there's no lack in supply in terms of any brand. There is no lack of retailers. There is no lack of events. So there's a huge accessibility difference in that regard in various different countries. And then the another aspect, I guess, is the legal age of being able to buy tobacco products and where to enjoy. Because in UK, for example, the regulation is likely to change, although it's not directly impacting the current smokers, but it's likely to change as of January 2027, making the age of being able to legally buy tobacco but impossible for anyone who is 15 of age this year or younger. Because every year they're going to be increasing, as of 27, they're going to be increasing the legal age of being able to buy tobacco 1 year later. So it's going to increase every year by one age.
You're
So
talking
basically,
about a generational smoking ban.
exactly. That's how they name it. So they're looking to create a smoke-free generation, and that's kind of the way they are tackling it. So that's although not going to impact the current smokers nor the venues for that matter, but how long will they be able to stay in the market once the law kicks in? Because when I go into the cigar lounges, which are opening up pretty much every month, one venue is opening up in London. The crowd is mostly youngsters rather than the old smokers. So there is definitely that portion of the population, the younger portion of the population, coming into the cigar smoking environment. But also they are opening up shops and stores as well. So the age of start smoking cigars as well as the age of trading cigars, from my point of view, is also becoming younger and younger. And that kind of what they are trying to break, I believe, in UK. So again, without banning or putting a ban to the already existing smoking population, they're looking to make it more and more difficult in future for anyone who would like to enjoy a cigar or any type of tobacco product for that matter, including chewing tobacco or snuff or that kind of way. Pricing is another aspect. We've seen 7-8 time increases in price when it comes to Cuban cigars, and then a couple of similar increases, as some of you have mentioned, in the New World cigars as well. And that's also impacting the accessibility to a certain extent, because obviously you just have to have that the buying power and excess cash that you can spend on cigars. So although it is, I guess it's growing at the moment, and more youngsters are coming into the cigar smoking population. Um, I don't know really how the future looks like in UK, is looking like at the moment, and how it will be changing once the regulation comes in place, if approved by the parliament. So that's I guess kind of my 2 cents on from the consumer point of view.
Thank you, Jem. Michael, I saw you unmuted your microphone. Did you want to add anything in regard to the generational smoking ban, or any thoughts on what Jem just shared?
Yes, well, Josh and I and our respective teams confer weekly on the threat that ever increasing generational bans represent here. We're working now very closely and excited about our collaboration with the European Cigar Manufacturing Association. I think you and I spoke briefly about that. In the past year, I was honored to present at their annual board of directors this past May in Budapest, and Cigar Rights of America has announced we are going to be supporting with a considerable contribution to ECMA's efforts to ensure that these types of threats, whether generational smoking bans or I've seen recently the EU has before it a proposal for banning cigars outdoors, that will be working through ECMA, that's hiring an additional staffer to help protect all the European interests. So we really are looking forward to that. And it helps us tremendously because it draws us closer to a lot of the wonderful research that organizations like Caresta do in Europe. They've done excellent scientific studies that show there's no practical means of creating machines or standards for methodology on how to ascertain the nature of smoke in a premium cigar. There's just too much variability agriculturally in the size, the shape, the curing, the smoking patterns and use. And they've been absolutely wonderful. Plus, so much of the incubator of bad tobacco control ideas comes from the framework conventional tobacco control under the auspices of the World Health Organization and the United Nations. And their laboratory for initiating these tends to be in the European continent. So having eyes and allies on the ground there really help to fortify our domestic interests, particularly when it comes to research and understanding what's coming down the pipeline. So we greatly sympathize with UK and Europe, and we're really looking forward to working with Paul Varakis. I know you know Paul; he's absolutely wonderful, and ECMA's in just excellent hands with him. So just wanted to add that thought.
Excellent point,
Question.
Michael, and very important. It's certainly greatly appreciated, and thank you for that important add-on.
Do you find that people, whether it's government or you're talking about World Health Organization, stuff like that, they always have their agendas. But do you find one of my biggest worded I guess points, the anti-smoking lobby, the crowd have always had such false statistics when it comes to cigars. We get lumped into big tobacco. Their statistics never make sense. You can easily manipulate that type of stuff. And I think people are much more open to listening nowadays to alternative points of view, where we can say, no, these are the, even the FDA came out with their own study saying, adult males that smoke, what was it, 2 or 3 or fewer cigars a day, it was like 0.00 something % chance of adverse health effects. But the smoking lobbies always use these outdated numbers, and I remember this 20 years ago when researching the CDC numbers and how they came across they were quoting 10-year-old numbers with that. The magic number was always like, what George could probably help, 425,000 people die from smoking related diseases every year. And that was from the study in the 90s. And if you got down to the actual verbiage from where that came from the actual doctors, it was diseases that may or may not have been contributed from smoking. It wasn't even 100% accurate. but they continued to use that same 400 and some thousand people every year, year after year after year after year. And it's like, so it's never changed. I mean, it's amazing the statistics that still get used that were never accurate in the first place. So I was just curious, are people more receptive in when you're lobbying towards alternative, more realistic statistics, especially when it pertains to cigars?
Increasingly, they are. And what's great is that you have a number of these prevailing currents, like Chevron deference, which was a rule that gave interpretation to regulatory matters rather than the courts, which the Constitution accords the interpretation. It relegated it back to the agencies. So the game they play in Washington is to work hand in hand with committees of jurisdiction and health staffers to purposely write laws that were broad and vague and generalized, so that it gave the agencies more latitude to interpret. If I refer back to NASEM and refer back to the Reagan-Udall, and Josh and I worked on certainly submissions with them, it was clear in their findings that they concurred, not just what Josh and I have known for a very long time, but what Judge Maida said. They have structural issues. They don't go where the science leads, and they have issues of transparency. So there has been a movement, both in the particular at the Center for Tobacco Products at the Food and Drug Administration, and more generally broad in the regulatory apparatus, that they've not always looked at where the science leads. And I think a lot of the problems we have in public health today go back to the idea that they have been fast and loose with some numbers. So there's a lot of different currents, and I'll give just two. One, this new Department of Governmental Efficiency that Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk are going to be running, are going to be looking at those types of things, along with what could be a post as Health SAR with RFK Jr. I think you're going to see a lot more science-led decisions. There's also a proposal F that gained favor during the Trump administration 8 years ago that is looking to focus on 500,000 civil service jobs, and the idea that these could be subject to similar dynamics as the Schedule C political appointees, where they come and go with different administrations. These could have serious impacts on the present agencies. But these, along with those prevailing currents, I think are some of the reasons why we're optimistic that there will be more of an embrace of the facts. To point out, CDC, their annual adult youth risk survey, conflates the questions, and they use the cigar term that includes both mass market cigars and handmade premium cigars. And they have important distinctions when it comes to usage and potential mortality, morbidity. So these conflationary attempts serve their political ends. But yes, we have found that legislators and regulators and many of the non-governmental organizations of the tobacco control universe increasingly are moving more towards accuracy and precision. They have a long way to go, in my opinion, but I'm optimistic about the way those winds are blowing too.
Jem, I have a brief follow-up question for you because you mentioned different audiences. How does that and everything you mentioned earlier also factor in with changing consumer behavior? For example, the younger crowds entering the premium cigar community now might have less of a predisposition towards Cuban cigars in the international markets and are probably more willing to try non-Cuban cigars, which also at the moment have increasingly more distribution and availability in the international markets. So it sort of brings us back full circle to the international aspect that Joshua was talking about in the beginning, and the increasing international efforts of both Cigarettes of America and Michael's wonderful contribution and how ECMA is going to be supported moving forward through the CRA and, of course, the PCA's efforts in increasing internationalization. How do you see that on the consumer end and the type of experiences that the younger consumers are gravitating towards?
I guess it depends on what really one understands from cigar smoking. I mean, if it's more of a someone that sees it as an experience that they will have once in a while, maybe one cigar, in couple of months, or couple of cigars per year, just because they were out with couple of friends, either in a work environment or social. They, as I saw, they tend to more navigate to the known brands, and mostly those are Cubans, if they have that kind of money to spend, and they tend to gravitate towards New World in such environments if they would like to keep it a bit more on the cost-effective side. But I guess for those who are really into cigars and have a better understanding and would like to also have a better understanding, they read more, they learn more. They have a more open mindset in regards to New World, and also obviously they have the existing experience of the Cubans as well. But again, I believe here the accessibility of the brands and of the regions is a big contributing factor too. In the most new cigar lounges, you would find in London, especially, you would find more Cubans than the New World cigars. You would find New World cigars as well, but mostly the majority is always the Cubans, and not only the low-end Cubans, but also like limited editions and high-end ones. So that probably is also a contributing factor too. I don't know if that kind of answers your question.
It certainly does. It certainly does, Jem. And coming slowly but steadily towards the end of our show, I would also like to start our closing statement round with you, Jem, and take a little outlook with all of us here, looking ahead and towards the end of 2024 and 2025 coming up. Are you bullish or bearish when it comes to the overall sentiment and evolution of the premium cigar community and the industry at the moment?
Well, I'll have a look at my crystal ball and tell you what I see. But I guess the industry still finds itself in a good situation, and it will probably remain the same. It probably will not show an increase as we've seen during the COVID era, just because of the money that people had access to, the excess money that they had during the COVID era. That's kind of diminishing, and also pretty much everywhere cost of living is becoming an issue. So buying cigars may not be that high as it was maybe just a year or two ago. But I guess still, until we see the really tightening regulations and scrutiny around the industry, I guess we'll still be in a good position. But again, we have to keep fighting against unnecessary pressure, and probably help those who are in power to understand what cigar industry and what cigar culture really means to a good portion of the public.
Amen to that. And I love that little crystal ball right there. Now, reminds me of that old saying that I use every other week. Peeking into the crystal ball. Beautiful. Well noted. It's everything. Everything is documented on the record.
Thanks so much.
Jeff,
Thank you very much.
over to you, and please share your thoughts and maybe also your hopes for the remainder of the year before 2024 comes to a close.
I still think we'll have another good holiday season. So as far as the rest of this year, and I think next year we're looking strong. I think regulation wise, that's helping. So I see a bright future for us. The key is just again to have good customer engagement, have a good place for them to hang out and educate them and set yourself apart from everyone else. So I think it's going to be good. Optimistic.
Michael, over to you.
That reminds me when I had spent some time with Henke Kellner at Davidoff. He embodies this beautiful philosophy that farmers have, and everything is relativistic. So I'll answer that question the way Henke responds to everything, which is depends. If we continue to remain vigilant and keep our foot on the throttle and recognize that we are in a global battle with myriad battlefields, I think it could be a very bright future. From the perspective of regulation and legislative, I think never have the lounges and the stores been more beautiful and welcoming, never have the cigars been better. So I think we're in a renaissance. Now, the other side of that is if we take these things for granted or remain apathetic or don't get involved with different organizations that protect these rights, then things could go the other direction. But I think that is how I'd respond to that.
Philip.
I have a very different view on all of this because I've been
We love a good controversy.
I've been through this since 35 years at least. I remember the Caribbean Basin Initiative. It was the tax that I paid, which was basically 5 cents a cigar. And now I see where we are now. So I can only concentrate on what I make and what I enjoy and what I love. And cigars is my world. So I grow the tobacco. It's a passion for me. I smoke the cigars. I share them with people that have like-minded thoughts. And I'm very optimistic because we're still here. And as long as we can get together and smoke a cigar and share our opinions and talk, I think this industry will keep on going. I've seen the evolution of it, like the wine industry, like the coffee industry, like the small batch bourbon industry. Everyone is coming out with new ideas. There's extensions on brands. There's extensions on regions. There's extensions on cepages and on seeds. And all of this is a plus to the consumer because it gives the consumer something more to look into, something more to discuss, something more to feel. And in the end, no matter what we say, it's that one instant of lighting a cigar, smoking, and enjoying it with yourself or who you're with, which in the end will make this business go on forever. Going back to one thing that we said before, in the late 1800s, there were more cigar factories in Michigan than there are in the world. So the cigar market has evolved. And who knows, it might come back that way again. One never knows. And so I think we have to be optimistic, as always, and not let the mafias of the world, which are the governments, put in tariffs and more layers on the hard work and sweat of people that are making the product and growing the tobacco, and for the ones that just simply want to enjoy some good time and smoking a good cigar in a nice establishment like Jeff's or other people's, and just letting them de-stress from the frenetic world that we live in now.
That's a beautiful closing statement, Philip. And both you and George, you look like you're barely getting started in the industry, and in prime condition and just starting to blossom. But George with probably just a few more seasons more in the industry than you had, Philip. We'll give him the honors of of the final statement, the closing statement here. So, George, what's your thoughts on today's show and everything that we discussed?
Well, I think we touched on a lot of great subjects today, and we got enough different viewpoints. But I think the thing that uh, probably unites us more than anything is that we are all agents of spreading the gospel of fine cigars, of what they contribute to your life and how they enrich it, and that it helps us to create threads in our world that are not easy to achieve in other circumstances. So that's the thing that we have to be aware of. That our mission is to keep fostering these beautiful cigars. But I also think that the lesson that we need to take away, particularly from listening to Mike and to Josh and also to Jen, is quite simple. We can never not be vigilant. We have to be aware that there are always killjoys out there that want to diminish our ability to enjoy, whether it's by virtue of the price that we have to pay or the place that we can find to actually enjoy a cigar in peace. So what's most important is that every single person that appreciates the joys of a fine cigar simply realizes that they have to support CRA and PCA and ECMA. And that's why I love that there are increasing cooperation between us on our home shores where we've been battling these issues longer, and other countries where they're not perhaps as sophisticated in their approach to educating legislatures. And remember also that embracing the ever-growing world of cigar media is the way that all of us foster increased communication. The more we can teach people, the idea of new countries, new factories arising, regardless of where they are, if they're putting out this product that is endlessly innovative, people have to know about it. So that's one of the functions of cigar media, and we all have a role to play in that. So support your people like PCA and CRA that are fighting for your rights, but at the same time, never forget that you yourself have to use your own voice. And the best way to make a new friend is to share a great cigar with you.
Amen to that, George. I couldn't think of a better closing statement. What a privilege and pleasure it's been to host you, gentlemen, and to share such an interesting and insightful panel discussion today. I want to wholeheartedly thank everybody who joined us today, all the viewers here via Zoom, and of course, everybody joining us over on YouTube via the live stream. Thanks again to Jem Ayrton from the El Lector blog. Many, many thanks to Michael Copperman from Cigarettes of America, Joshua Habersky from the Premium Cigar Association, Jeff Grainer, Classic Cigars of Tulsa. If you ever find yourself in Tulsa, that's the place to go. Check it out and give Jeff a visit. And then, of course, the one and only Philip Wynn from Felipe Gregorio Cigars, and the legend, the man, the myth, George Brightman. Thanks, everybody. What a wonderful show. We'll see you all again next week, same time, same station here at the Light 'em Up Lounge. Until then, light 'em up and take it easy, everybody.
Thank you, Reinhard.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank you.
Reinhard. Great job today. Really great.
Great
Thanks
show.
for everybody.
Thank you.
Sign out.